As we spent time in the Bowden house, one of the greatest pleasures that we've had, instead of going through the stuff, has been the people that we met. And today we had the opportunity to spend time with Sue Hall. Sue was Coach's administrative assistant for 24 years, and she has got some really great stories to tell. So enjoy watching this. Sue, I'm Mark Manley with Wiregrass. It is such a pleasure to meet you.
You too. I was with Coach Bowden for 21 years and then for 3 more.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right.
You'll know how I started?
Please tell me.
Okay.
Please tell me.
I started in 1979. Coach Bowden came to Florida State in 76.
Okay.
Okay. He had 3 secretaries.
3 secretaries in 3 years?
2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And the secretary that was there, my husband worked at the alumni office, and her husband was named Jimmy. And he said, "Charles, I know your wife is looking for a state job." And he said, "My wife worked for Coach Bowden, and she's quitting. She says it's too much hard work. She can't do it." So I go over there, get an interview through, a few people that I got the personal interview. I was 40 years old. Okay. We hit it off because he said to me, "Sue, I'm looking for a mama for my football team because I'm their daddy." He said, "So many of these kids do not have mom and dad. They're raised by grandmother." Whatever. I said, "Coach, I've raised 3 sons." I said, "I'd fit right in there." I said, "My husband and I used to coach Little League football." And I said, "I've been going to FSU games since I was 16. So, but, we just hit it off, and probably because of my age. But I was a mama to the team.
All right. I've heard one thing that Ginger told us yesterday when we were talking about you is that the players actually called you Mom.
They call me Mama Sue.
Mama Sue.
Do y'all know Edgar Bennett?
I don't. Tell me about
Edgar
it.
Bennett was in the 80s. He and Leroy Butler, the famous Punt Brewski Leroy Butler,
Right.
both went to the Green Bay Packers. And Edgar would call me, "Mama Sue, come to my game, come to my game." "Edgar, I can't. We're in football season. Then we're in recruiting season. I could never go." Well, after my husband passed, I finally got to go up there for a game. And Edgar Bennett was then the offensive coordinator. Well, after that, they weren't doing so good, so they let the offensive coordinator go. He went to the Raiders.
Okay.
From the Raiders, he were in California, then they were in Las Vegas. So he calls me one day, "Mama Sue, you haven't been up to see our stadium, da-da-da-da-da." So my son Chet, we go out there. And this was 2 years ago. Well, then in the fall, he calls me one day and says, "Mama Sue, I'm getting to go home." He was from Jacksonville. He said, "The Jacksonville Jaguars have hired me as their receiver coach." So it was 2 Sundays ago, I guess I was over there for their last game.
All right. So your relationship with the players then was much more than just the years that they spent at FSU.
Exactly. I go to their weddings. I get Mother's Day. I get all kind of phone calls or Mother's Day cards. Because I really was. They'll tell you, "Coach Bowden wants to see you." They'd go in there and see me. "Mama said, what's he going to say? What's he going to do?" I said, "Sugar." I called him all sugar. "It'll be okay." But you have to kind of make them feel at ease. But,
Right.
no, it's the relationship with so many of them. And just like little old Warwick Dunn, you had to, when he came here because of his mother being shot and killed,
Right.
you just want to hug them and take care of them.
And part of that story is in the Bowden Legacy.
Yeah.
And watching that and how now knowing that you were a part of that, knowing that Coach basically took him in as a son.
Absolutely. And the first, him, Charlie Ward, Charlie being a senior, but Charlie's mom and dad lived in Thomasville,
Right.
And they would go up there all the time. And that Ward family, they just took that young man in and loved him. And,
Yeah, I remember that from the movie. In fact, a little story about Charlie Ward. Charlie's a little younger than I am, but his mom and daddy taught and coached at the high school. They were at Central when I was at Central.
Yeah, he was the basketball coach, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah. Coach Ward was the basketball coach, and it was. You just kind of feel this connection.
Yeah. And what a wonderful family. You know about the Charlie Ward Foundation.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I volunteer, that I send out all their mail outs. And I just feel so privileged being part of that family because they're so giving, and what they're doing just fills my heart that kids need a place to go now.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie has taken what the Lord blessed him with, and just and truly given it back.
And his wife also.
Yes, yeah.
And she's an amazing lady. Yeah, she's given up her law practice. You know, she's graduate from Miami Law School.
So she is just basically doing the foundation, and
Yeah, there's so much to do, and yeah.
And Charlie's back home at head coach at FAMU. Yeah,
We're so excited for him. I hope he does well there, and he should.
yeah. Do you have any other stories about special players?
You know, John McClain was one of my favorite players. He was back in the early 90s. His brother, Scott McClain, also played at FSU. But his mother and daddy and me and Charles were very, very good friends. We did a lot of things together. But back when you can't do these things now, my husband and I, we had a place on Lake Talcum, Gadsden County side, and we loved to fish. We would take kids down there all the time to go fishing. Have big fish fries, cheese grits, most of these kids never heard of. But
that was the northern kids that had never heard of the cheese grits.
I know. But Odell Higgins, and he calls me Mama Sue, he and I were the best friends in the world, and he would go down there and spend the night with us, and my brother-in-law would take him out on the lake. They'd fish all night long. Odell loves to fish, and he is one of the, I love that guy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he is very special, and his wife and his daughter. So, yeah.
So I know you've been in this room a lot of times.
Oh, yes.
A lot of memories in this room.
Absolutely.
You see a lot of memorabilia in here that you're very familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
What does it feel like today to be here?
Well, it kind of feels like you at home, but his lounge chair was there and the sofa was there, and Ann was always on the sofa, and he was always sitting there. And I'd sit in a little chair there and we'd talk, and go over things. But when he was so sick in the hospital, I during COVID, I believe, and he was, this house, people still kept sending mails and stuff to be signed and all the stuff. So he he was in the hospital for a while before he called me to come help him. And I would go up there and sit with him. And I was doing a Bible study on the women of the Bible, Ruth, Sarah, Mary. And you could tell he was in pain because he couldn't get comfortable. He couldn't go to sleep, and he was just all over that bed. And I finally said, Coach Bowden, would you like for me to read to you? And he said, well, what are you reading? And I said, the women of the Bible. And he said, well, do you have one in there on Sarah? And I said, yes. He said, yeah, would you read that to me? So I started reading, and I bet I hadn't read up 2 paragraphs and he was sound asleep. But it's just that him thinking about God or whatever he was thinking, it helped him relax. Like I said, God really looked after him, just helped him relax and to be able to rest. But when he got out of the hospital and he came home, he called me one day, Sue, I need some help. I said, what's that, Coach? He said, I've got that office in there was full of boxes where people were sending him things and mail and bills, and he wanted to know would I come do all that stuff for him. And I did. But, one of the things that caught me was people would send packages to him. Okay, right. Some people would send the UPS to send them back. Some people expected him, and he would go to UPS.
And ship it back.
Give me the money to send the packages.
Wow.
But anyway, this kind of person he was. He didn't think about being money. He just said, oh, they want this, so send it back. But the mail was unreal even then. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about Coach's faith.
Yeah.
Yesterday, and I know you'll remember this very well, yesterday, Ginger found the original letter that Coach wrote to the children
Yeah.
after Bowden and John were killed in the wreck.
I know. Then that just,
Oh, wow.
no.
I told Ginger when I started reading it, I said, I may not make it through this without tearing up. In fact, I'm getting a little emotional now, even talking about
I
it.
read it too, but that was him.
But that was the original letter, and Ginger said that I don't know how he got it to you at that point, but Coach wrote it in the airport, sent it to you, and told you to send all the kids a copy of it. And one part that he had in that letter was that he knew he was going to heaven.
Yes.
And that he would only count his life successful if all his children and grandchildren came to heaven to be with him.
No, that was him.
So it wasn't about the football.
No. Well, it's one of the things that he would, when we talked about, how we were going to run things at the office and whatever, and he'd tell you, I'll always talk to a church. I'll always talk to FCA and then motivational where people pay me. But he said, that's the first priority as a church. Well, I was at the Methodist church here in town, and we were having a revival, but my pastor said, so can you get Coach Bowden to come over and speak to church? I said, sure. I mean, yeah, he always said yes. So he said, sure, I'll come speak to you, church. Well, I didn't tell him we were having revival. I just said the preacher wanted him to come speak at church. So, bless him, he always had his little notes. So we go there to the church, and pastor, his name is Jim. He invited him back. Both of us come back to his office so he could pray before we go in church. And he said, Bobby, we're having a revival, and I want to pray about it. So I saw Coach Bowden take those notes, slip them down his pocket, and I said, that's strange because he is, like this. But anyway, we went out there, and I have never heard him preach like this. I want you to know right now, do you know where you're going to be when you leave this earth? I mean, he was just revival.
Oh, wow.
Like the big Baptist that he is. I left there and said, Coach Bowden, I've never heard you preach like that before. He said, well, Sue, he said it was a revival, and that's what you do. You save people at revival.
You revive them at the revival.
That's right. But I've taken him to many churches to speak, but never heard him do that. It's mostly about, football and players and
Right.
that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
What, talk to us a little bit about Ann.
And, Ann was the best head coach's wife I've ever met. And I've met a lot of them. She took care of these young coaches' wives when they came in. Maybe some of them wouldn't have made it. It's tough. You never see your husband. They get up and leave early before the kids get up. You get the kids ready for school yourself. They come home at night after the kids are gone to bed. I mean, but she took care of them. Beginning of the season, she'd have all the coaches' wives here, including the managers and trainers' wives. They would come. She would have, a nice luncheon, and we'd talk about football season and all that. She really looked after them, and she talked to them, and one game a year they were allowed to go away to away game. And she would always find something for them to do at the away games. But she really looked after them. She was wonderful. And when we first came here, our football department was probably as big as this room. It was pretty small.
Right.
And we all kind of, coaches had office together, which all they could do was the desk and each sit on the side. I mean, it was really small. We had one bathroom, too, for the ladies and the guys. And so, it was, but when we would have recruits in, I mean, we had a patio outside, and she and I would go out there, and we would clean the patio on a Friday afternoon is when they would be coming in. And she, would bring flowers and stuff. I mean, when it was cold, we'd go in the dining room. But, it was amazing what she did do. And then in 1979 is when she started the Extra Point Club, which were 200 women. that,
Which is still going strong now.
oh my gosh, is it ever strong? I'm still a member, 47 years there.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, it's a great organization and the women love it. They're the ones that standing out there with the signs, can I help you when people come to football games? They're the ones that clean the sod cemetery, and you know about the sod cemetery.
Tell me about the sod cemetery.
Okay. All right. The sod cemetery was started, and I don't remember what year. Cole Moore, whenever we were underdogs going to a away game and we won, we would cut a piece of the sod and bring it home and put it in a little coffin and plant it. It's right outside it's between the softball and the football area. There's a pretty good size area, I'm going to say about like this, with nice plaques on them telling the game.
Okay.
Okay, we still do it to this day.
Wow.
And when we have a football game and we're like Miami, we've got them out there. These ladies, we go out there and we clean off the stones and put flowers out there. And then usually Doug Mannheimer, who takes care of that, anyway, he'll have some players that played on that team come back and talk about the sod cemetery and winning the game. And it's quite unique.
So who started the sod cemetery?
Well, Doug Mannheimer with Cole Moore.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, started that. But it's there's some history on that too. It's quite interesting what we've done.
What about Ann started the club.
Right.
Tell us about what you saw with her and the kids and the support that she gave to Coach Bowden.
Starting with Ann when she was young and, like when they were in South Georgia. I mean, Ann's the one that gets the kids up on Sunday, polishes their shoes, makes sure their clothes are pressed to go to church. She was just amazing, and they were always in church. They were always dressed correctly. And every morning, I know I've sat there and watched Coach Bowden. He gets up at 4:30 in the morning and reads his Bible study and his devotional. And then when the kids come for breakfast, they have Bible study or he does devotional there with them. So they were all raised the right way, with their dad doing all this and Ann. And even after all the kids move, Ann says, Bobby gets up, he does devotional. When I get up, I sit there at the table and we have Bible study and the devotional. So that always, whatever but Ann always looked great. She was always fashion, makeup. She never would embarrass her husband by not being the proper lady.
Yeah, she was a beautiful woman. She is a beautiful woman.
Well, she won what, Mrs. something, what at Howard.
At Howard, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she is a beautiful lady.
And she was always there supporting Coach.
Absolutely. She really did. And I felt sorry for her when he, was let go the way he did. And people would say, she shouldn't be bitter or whatever. Yes, she should be. I'm still bitter. I'm right there with her.
I understand 100%.
I mean, I've seen Coach Bowden tear up twice in my lifetime with him, twice. And one of them was his mother passed. Well, I take that back 3 times. One of them was when the last day he left the office, tears were down his sleeve. And when Bert Reynolds, he knew Bert Reynolds was safe.
Well.
So you want the Bert Reynolds story?
Please.
You got time. Okay. Bert Reynolds, would come and he fell in love with Coach Bowden. He got where he came all the time to our ball games. And like I say, my husband and I would always not always, but most of the time pick him up at the airport, take him back after the game. We became very good friends. And over the years, I've spent many times at his home, etc. But anyway, on his 79th birthday, my husband already passed away. And I don't know, the man that took care of him wherever he went, he made Bert's all of his arrangements for flights where he was going,
Right.
took care of him, that kind of stuff. And anyway, he calls me and says, Bert wants you to come down for his 79th birthday. And he said, you can bring 2 ladies. Well, I did bring 2 ladies, and they still to this day thank me for coming out there. Well, the next year he turns 80.
Mm-hmm.
So they called me and said, Sue, we want you to come for Bert's 80th birthday party, and you can bring 1 friend, but you can't stay at the house. I always stayed at the house,
Right.
Charles and I did. But he said, because we got so many people coming in here from California or whatever that will be staying there. And I said, that's okay. I said, but I called his girlfriend and I said, I need to know where a cheap hotel is, coming down there. So she found me one, a little mom and pop place. Well, it's in February, and the price of hotels,
Oh, yeah.
at that time of year are tremendous. So one day, Ann Bowden calls me and says, Sue, can you come over and see me and Coach? And I said, sure. So she said, they got an invitation to Bert's birthday party. And she will know how I was going. And I said, well, I'm driving, me and Kathy. And she said, well, can Bobby and I go with you? I said, sure. So we talked about what time to leave and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, the next day, I get a call from a man named Tim Revel. Okay, he owned the Champion University Cadillac Buick at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls me and he says, Sue, I hear you are taking Coach down to Jupiter for Bert Reynolds' birthday. And I said, yes. He said, well, how are you going? Well, I had a little Chevrolet Equinox. He said, I'm going to bring you a car. So he brings me this big old SUV to drive Coach Bowden down there. I mean, God always looks after Coach Bowden, I tell you. So anyway, so I called the girlfriend back and said, Coach Bowden and Ann, I'm bringing them down. Can you find us a hotel? She did. She called me and said, when you go there, ask for so-and-so and he'll take care of you. This is where God comes in. So we go there. This hotel that was there, outside were Maseratis, all these fancy cars. But anyway, that Chevrolet I was driving was probably a $70,000 car at that time. Anyway, so we go in there and they had set up, they had a suite for us, Coach Bowden and one end, being Kathy at the other end, in this big open space. They had all kind of food there, fruits, drinks, everything. And the guy asked me, he said, would Coach Bowden sign a few footballs? I said, sure. So they brought a bunch of footballs and things, and he signed. Well, when we left, we were there 2 nights. When we left, this is where God comes in again. For this place that I figured it was going to just bankrupt me, charged us $165 for the cleaning of the rooms only.
Oh, well.
And I said, everywhere you go, Coach Bowden, people, look after him and take care of him. But anyway, so, that was one of the things that with Bert. But then what happened when we were going down there, Coach Bowden said to me one day, he said, Sue, when we go, he said, I want you to find a time that me and you can be with Bert by ourselves. He said, Ann and Kathy can get, the guy there, get him to take them somewhere on the campus there with Bert. It was a huge complex where Bert lives. So, he even had out on the water the helicopter pad where he used to, a swimming pool with a huge thing of the Seminole in the bottom of it. He had 2 bungalows outside his house, another big area with an office under it. It's just a huge complex. So I told him, I said, take Kathy and Ann to show them around. So anyway, Coach Bowden wanted me to be with him to help bring him to Christ. I said, Coach Bowden, you don't want me to do that. And he said, no, I want you with us because I know how Bert loves you. So I'm thinking, okay, God, what am I going to say to him? I had this thing too. But anyway, I decided when we were talking and they left, and I said, Bert, Coach Bowden and I want to talk to you about your salvation. And kind of looking at me, and I said, Bert, we love you, And when we go to heaven, we want you with us. And he's looking at me like, okay, what's this all about, Sue? And I don't know what else I said to him, but I thought, this is better Coach Bowden and him one-on-one. I'm going to lead. And I did. Came back about 20 minutes later. Everything's fine. We get in the car to go back to the hotel. And his guy calls me and he says, Sue. I said, yeah. He said, what did you and Coach Bowden say to Bert? I said, what do you mean? He said, something happened to him. And I said, like what? No, nothing bad. He said, he's just kind of changed.
Just different.
Yeah, but one thing about it, I believe when 79th birthday, Bert wasn't doing well. His 80th birthday, I believe they think he's not going to live longer. And really, because he had a cane, he leaned over, he looked death itself. He was in horrible pain. Now, his next door neighbor was an orthopedic surgeon. And we had cookouts with him. And he said, Sue, Bert's had 3 back operations. He cannot have another one. He will be paralyzed. So he's going to be in pain the rest of his life. You know, it was sad, but anyway, it was a wonderful birthday party. Many people from California came. So after the birthday party, Bert died. Okay, 2018, Bert died later. Okay, it allowed him, I believe, 2 more years to live after what he and Coach Bowden went through. And what I brought you today is Trans Am World here in Tallahassee. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes.
Okay. They call me, I'm at the golf course. They call me Billy Section Boosters. Sue, I need you to bring Coach Bowden out to Trans Am World. I said, what's Trans Am World? He said, well, that's where they take Chevrolets and make them look Trans Am. Bert's here and he's signing the doors and he wants you and Bobby here. This is where God comes in with you. I said, okay, Billy, I'm out at the Seminole Golf Course. Let me see if I can find him. I called the house, no answer. I called Ann's cell phone. I said, Ann, where's your husband? She said, we're sitting here at the Village Inn. We both had to have fasting blood work this morning. We went and had the blood work. Now we're sitting here having breakfast. I said, well, let me talk to him. And I told him that Bert was there and wanted him to come. And he said, yeah. I said, well, they want us there at noon. And he said, well, I got to go home and take a shower. I said, well, I do too. I'm out here on the golf course. But see how that happens?
Oh, yeah.
You know, but anyway, we go there. Coach Bowden is standing here talking to the crowd. I mean, it's further away than you think. And there is me and Bert. We're over there talking. And I look at him and I said, Bert, what happened to you? And he said, what do you mean, Sue? I said, when we left your birthday party, you were so sick. You had a cane. You were walking with a cane. I said, what happened to you? And he said, you know what happened to me. And I said, it's what you and Bobby did for me. And about that time, Coach Bowden comes over there and we're taking pictures. So anyways, that's that little story.
Well,
So when we leave there, I said to Coach, what happened when we left, you know, when I left and you were there with Bert? He said, Sue, we got down on our knees and I brought him to Jesus Christ. And he said, one thing, he said, I gave him there at Trans Am World, he said, I gave him one of my little crosses to wear. And he said, but he won't ever wear it. You know, just point. I said, okay. All right. That was in, okay, a month went by and his man calls me and he says, Sue, I'm sending you a picture. Bert and I are at the Palm Beach Mall and he is autographing his book, new book. And he said, I want you to show it to Coach Bowden. And I said, okay. So this is what he sent me.
oh, and Bert's wearing the cross.
Well, I had it on my cell phone. So I called the house, about him going to bed. Nobody bothers him. It was about 7:00 at night. So Robin was here and I said, Robin, I need to come see your dad. She said, Sue, he's gone to bed and you don't bother me. I said, Robin, I have to come see him. I've got something he's got to see. Okay, so I come over here and she calls him, there. "My Dad, Sue's here, wants to see you." Well, he comes down, putting this house coat on, and he was mad. I mean, he really mad. And I said, "Coach Bowden, I'm sorry. I had to come show you this." And anyway, I take my cell phone out and where you could see that. And he looked at that and he looked at me and he said, "Sue, do you know what this means?" And tears were coming out of his eyes. And he said, "He's advertising for the Lord." And he was just so emotional about Bert advertising for the Lord there. But, 3 or 4 months went by and his man called me and said, "Sue, can you send me some more of this process?" We've worn that out, the one he had, but it showed you he continuously did that, which I feel God let him live 2 more years to make that last movie star. And, it's just amazing. But when he passed, he had one living relative left, Nancy Lee. And so Nancy called, that's his niece. Nancy calls me and to tell me, she said, "Sue, you're the first person I called to tell you that Uncle Bud," that's where she called him, "passed away because I knew how he loved you."
Right.
And so she was crying, and I said, "Nancy, it's okay." She said, "What do you mean it's okay?" And I said, "I know where Bert is." She said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Did you not know that he was saved, that Coach Bowden saved him?" She had no idea. He never told her. And so, we talked about it, and I think I made her feel better. A couple of days went by, and she calls me, and she says, "Sue, we were just gonna have Bert cremated, but now that you've told me this, I want to have a religious service. And would you ask Coach Bowden if he'd come down and preach the service?" So I called him, and he said, "Of course." So my son and I take him and Ann all the way down there. And, the funeral home, you couldn't get in unless
I'm
you
sure.
had a special invitation. But anyway, Coach did a beautiful job of preaching, that service.
I think we have one of those invitations,
Do you?
and I know we have the thank you letter
Really?
that Bert's niece wrote to Coach,
Okay.
thanking
Good, I'm
him.
glad, yeah. I mean, but, when I think about how God does things with Bert and how things but if you could have seen him at that Trans Am World, just as perky as he can be, when we left his birthday, I just knew he wouldn't be on this earth much longer. But it's according to what Coach Bowden helped him like Mark Brick.
God gave him those extra days.
He absolutely did. Like I said, Coach, God's not through with you yet. That's the reason you're still here.
Do you remember the day with Mark Rick?
When, I remember him coming up to Coach Bowden's office. Yeah.
So you remember when Pablo was killed, and
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure you remember that because that had to have been a traumatic time.
Absolutely. And when they went into that meeting room, where all the kids sit in that one space was not there. And he talked to those kids about their salvation. "You see that empty spot? Do you know where you're going to be?" I mean, and it made quite an impact on those players, I believe.
Yeah. No, obviously, I mean, Mark Rick's documented that very well.
But one of the things when Coach Bowden did, every morning when they had their meetings, even the GAs, they had a devotion. And those young men would come in there and say, "Miss Sue, I need to do a devotion today, and I don't know what to say." I always kept bull books with devotions in them. I'd give them to him, and I said, "You look on there and find something. It's okay if you read it. At least you're doing it." So they learned from him to start the day off thanking the Lord. That-
We touched on this a little bit outside, but there's just no way to know the impact that Coach Bowden had on the eternity of his players, the people he interacted with, Bert Reynolds.
Yeah. So many of them that have gone on to be preachers, or like I said, that have gone on to coach football so they can impact these young men the same way Coach Bowden impacted them. That says a lot.
All right. We've talked a lot about Coach's faith. We've talked about football. Tell us, was Coach the same man all the time?
Yes, he really was. Well, did I say he was? He loved to joke. I mean,
But you told us a little earlier that he could get mad.
Oh, yeah. But I tell you, I mean, he could get mad, but, you stayed away. You never went in there in his office when he was mad. He was mostly mad if we lost a football game. But we didn't lose that many when I was there.
That's
So
fact.
when I went there in 79, okay, for his birthday, all right, I had somebody make a cake with the Orange Bowl man on it. You might have seen that picture.
I think I have. Yeah.
Okay, I had it made. How would I know we were going to the Orange Bowl? I just had such faith working with him. And, he, this, I said, we're going to go to the Orange Bowl this year, Coach Bowden. And we did. So I told him I was his good luck charm.
I'm convinced. I mean, 100% convinced.
I founded the Garnet and Gold Girls, our recruiting hostesses, which is still going strong today. Now, we didn't have any money back then. My sister was a seamstress, okay? She spent the summer sewing up the uniforms, putting zippers in, the pads, sewing up where the pads go in there. And, the jerseys, she sewed up the jerseys. We didn't have all these new things till Bert Reynolds bought the first really nice uniforms. He bought, 3 or 4 sets of uniforms. Did you know?
I didn't know that.
He did. The first ones he did, the pants were called Notre Dame Gold. I remember that. So beautiful gold pants. So we had a garnet and gold. Then he did this ugly yellow, supposed to be all, I think we wore those a couple of times. Then I believe he did a black, a gold. But he bought the first 3 sets before we were winning, and Nike gets in to make all the money and do all that. Well, our Garnet and Gold girls, we actually sold donuts to the fraternity guys. We did car washes to raise money for our uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
So and a guy named Jim McLaughlin, who wound up being fashion merchandising at FSU, he worked at a department store, and I went to see him, and he helped order these uniforms. So from there, when we had to do another uniform, Lonnie Anderson designed a sweater-like vest for us. My sister made the skirts there at the, in the equipment room, and that was our second set of uniforms. So Bert got involved in that too. I wished I'd have brought some pictures showing that, but I got all that stuff too.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground talking about Coach. What's the have we missed anything that you want people that watch this to know about Coach and Miss Ann?
You know what? Every time Ann would come in that office, his face lit up. You could just see the love in his face, seriously. I mean, he always loved seeing her. It was just amazing, their connection. That's what I would say, true love, really.
72 years of marriage.
Oh, I mean, and she still made herself up and made herself look good for him every day. You never see her lounging in around. I mean, she really was. But she took care of the house. But one thing, and I always admired about him, and really did, Sue, no matter where I am, get me home at night. I want to be at home with my wife at night. How many other coaches did that? No, they were glad to go, or I mean, they shouldn't say that. But I don't know of another coach that wanted to be at home every night with his wife. And to the point, one time he was speaking in Dallas, Texas. Okay. So it's about 1 a.m. My phone rings at home. And it's Coach Bowden. He said, Sue, we're running late. And he said, from the airplane here that's flying to Atlanta, the state aircraft's supposed to pick him up in Atlanta. And he said, call them and tell them I'm running about 40 minutes late and don't leave me. Well, I didn't have their phone numbers at home, so my husband, bless his heart, he was the best guy in the world. He and I got in the car, went to the football office, go up there and found the plane manifest and everything, and we called those guys. And he said, good thing you called. We were just fixing to leave. We just figured Coach wasn't coming. And I said, he's running about 40 minutes late, but he meant he was going to get home that night. And so after that, no matter, every time I went, he was gone. I had that plane manifest in my pocket for call as well. But yeah, he always came home, no matter what time it was, he got home at night. How can you just not appreciate that?
It's amazing.
It is. But yeah, and they did so many fun things together. All those cruises that we took with the staff. I mean, he and Ann entertained everybody. They never turned anybody away. It was really amazing. Now, a couple on one of the cruises, they came in. She had her wedding dress on, and he had his tux on and flower. They figured Coach Bowden, because he preached, he was an ordained minister and could marry them. And he told him no, he couldn't. Well, I was sitting there with him, he and Ann, and we were talking about it. And they had everything ready. And I said, I'm a notary public. I'll marry you. And I did.
Wow.
There on the ship. So, you never know when you're going to be called on, so be prepared.
The stories that you have.
Yeah, but since then, I've done several weddings. I did one for a reporter in Orlando. Anyway, he was here, and he asked me to do his service, and he and his bride, they wrote their own vows and everything. I mean, it was a wonderful, service, but I felt so honored that he wanted me, but he appreciated the fact that, he needed to talk to Coach Bowden. He always got to talk to Coach Bowden, so, fun stuff. So there is fun, but it was hard work. I've never worked so hard in all my life.
It was hard work, but gosh, it must have been so rewarding.
I still get rewards. I still get rewards from being with Coach Bowden, and I'll tell you why. Sister that lives in California, I just had some knee surgery, and I went out there. And I had to have a wheelchair to get around. So I was looking for where the wheelchairs are, and I'm standing there, this is in L.A., at the airport looking. And some lady comes up and she said, can I help you? And I said, yes, I need wheelchair. And she said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to Tallahassee. She said, you know what? I used to be in the circus at FSU. And I said, really? She said, yeah. She said, do you know Coach Bobby Bowden? I said, yeah, I was his secretary for all. She turned around to some guy, hey, you come over here. You take care of this woman right now. You get her where she needs to go, and don't you leave her as she gets on that airplane. See how he still helps me? I mean,
you have been such a blessing to us today. I have loved, what I've loved as much as anything about doing this project. We're very honored that the Bowden family called us.
I am too. Yeah, I'm glad they did, because y'all sound like great people.
Well, thank you. But it's just been, everyone that knew Coach has stories when they come in this house.
They do.
And, it's from the reporters to the family friends and to talking to the kids. I mean, you get the kids on the telephone, and I'll have to call them about a specific aspect of what's coming up, and
the stories.
And it just gets stories. We just get stories. And
well, you mentioned Jim Henry, Jerry Coots. How about Gene Deckerhoff? Is he cooked down?
Gene Deckerhoff is coming tomorrow to do exactly what you're doing right now.
Love his stories.
He's coming tomorrow. We are super excited about that.
Senior day, we always had senior cookout here, all the seniors. My husband and I and my son, Chet, we would come out here, and Coach Bowden's checking some of the steak out. But me and Ann, we'd made homemade ice cream. We had steak, baked potato, corn on the cob, all this stuff for the seniors. They love coming here for their last, meal together with Coach Bowden.
One of the things that has really struck me about the stories that we've heard about Coach Bowden is how he was such a people person.
Oh, absolutely.
That the stories that you talk about making homemade ice cream, I don't know why, but, Bobby Bowden being bigger than life, I don't imagine his wife making homemade ice cream.
But she did peach from Georgia peaches. She made peach ice cream. I'd be in the kitchen with best peach ice cream you've ever seen. My husband made peanut butter ice cream because we went up to a place in Georgia and a rural restaurant, and they had peanut butter ice cream, and that was the best ice cream my husband ever had. And the lady said, well, my husband, we have a peanut farm. We think of everything we can to do peanuts. So he got the recipe from her, and he made the peanut butter ice cream.
Peanut butter ice cream and peach ice cream.
Oh,
Tommy, I'll tell you this.
he
Well-
was just like his dad.
I had never talked to Tommy. He had talked to our CFO, Ethan, that you met out front. I woke up one morning with extreme vertigo.
Oh, geez, bless your heart.
I mean, throwing up extreme vertigo.
I've had it like that. It's
And
fun.
I was at home in my recliner, and our office manager called, and she said, Tommy Bowden's on the telephone. Can you talk to him? And I was literally, I said, yeah, I can talk to him. Well, he called, and that was when we were talking about whether the real estate was going to be in the auction or not. He said, let's talk about this real estate again, and we did. And that's when, as Sherry said, I'm sitting there talking to him, and Tommy said, have you ever heard of Buc-ee's? I said, well, yeah, I've heard of Buc-ee's. I said, we stop at, our kids are in Athens, and every time we go to Athens, we stop at the Buc-ee's in Warner Robins. He said, well, you know how when you go to Buc-ee's, he said, you get your gas and you can get a brisket sandwich and they got clean restrooms and you can get souvenirs. He said, it's a one-stop shop. I said, yeah. I said, I love that about it. He said, well, we want Wiregrass to be our one-stop shop.
What a way to put it.